we're obviously playing musical chairs in there.
Well, we just want to be cozy.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. Baker Book House welcomes you. And this is a special evening. I have been reading Katherine's books since, I think Dear Mr. Knightley was the first one that I read. So, and I'm sure it was only, a couple of years ago, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I've read them all. And so when I heard about London House, I was very excited to get a copy. Because if you haven't had the pleasure of reading it, I can tell you right now, it's very different and very good. You're going to thoroughly enjoy it, but Katherine's going to tell us all about it and all her research. And we will do a little Q&A at the end. So save your questions for the end. We will do that. But I would like to welcome Katherine, have her join us here. And we are so glad you came. And I'm glad you made that email to us.
You're on.
So first of all, thank you all for coming. It's so nice to see you, and it's very nice to be out and about with people again. This is lovely. So thank you. After 8 contemporary novels and 1 contemporary nonfiction book, I pretty much sort of solidly placed myself in that genre, and for good reason. I truly believe contemporary novels. Jane Austen was a contemporary writer. We think of it as historical fiction, but she was cutting edge. She was addressing what was happening around her, sometimes with great satire. But my point is, I love contemporary fiction because in the safety of our own living room, we get to step into another's shoes, another's journey, and we get to grow in empathy and humanity and understanding because we are walking a walk we would never be able to, perhaps. However, I also believe that we don't live our best present unless we sort of access, understand, own our past. So in considering the issues I wanted to tackle in the London House, I came to the conclusion that it would be really great to bring that past front and center stage, rather than leave it as backstory or just random family history that was accessed just obliquely. So I brought it front and center stage in a dual storyline or split time storyline. And so that's what you have within the London House. The interwar years and the early days of World War II, along with a contemporary story. I thought the interwar years and World War II actually turned out to be quite perfect because they felt perhaps a little like our own time. A time when sort of the stability and security seemed to be giving way to something new, different, perhaps a little anxiety producing, and maybe in the end, the world would not look quite as it did before. And so digging into that really had great relevance also for the contemporary storyline. But in the interwar years, you'll find 2 of the 3 women, and pretty much I think my 2 favorites, Caroline, whose nickname is Caro, and her twin sister Margaret. And they grew up in luxury in the interwar years, getting knee scrapes, wearing beautiful gowns, having tea parties, and they come of age at the very beginning of World War II, and they fall in love, and they start to have secrets, and they split. One goes to France, and one stays in England. Margaret, in England, she's listening to Winston Churchill, who is not Prime Minister at that time. He is actually out of favor. He is sequestered and he's practicing or working on his writings because he is not beloved by the Prime Minister at the time. But she's also listening to Prime Minister Baldwin and Chamberlain, who are saying, we need appeasement, we need peace. And in fact, you get that Munich Agreement on September 30th, 1938, where Chamberlain declares he has secured everlasting peace, peace for our time. Now that is what Caro in France will say, hey, our Prime Minister is saying peace, why are you worried? Whereas Margaret will say in England, but did you hear Churchill's retort? You have peace with dishonor, you will have war. So Margaret is listening to those early gong sounds of war. Caro is in France, and in 1938, modernist designer Elsa Scaparelli introduced one of her most extravagant collections. Now, Scaparelli was the top of the haute couture fashion game. She was rival to Coco Chanel. But to be honest, prior to this, hers was not a name I knew well. But she has dresses I know well. I'll show you one in a minute. But in 1938, she launched her circus collection. And it was an extravagant, escapist collection of beautiful silk gowns, buttons that looked like acrobats. And on the opening night, and I've heard it called the last great party, her 98-room mansion on the Place Vendôme, which held her salon, had huge ladders tipped to the second and third floor windows so that acrobats could tumble through the windows. As the mannequins, who we call models, displayed the dresses going down the marble staircase. They had towers of champagne glasses built and champagne pouring through them. They had salesgirls all dressed in sleek black with hats fashioned like ice cream cones on their heads. I mean, it was just like nothing I'd ever heard of. But that was 1938, the same time as I told you, the Munich Agreement. Hitler was definitely advancing west. And part of my belief is you have this extravagant party is because France, unlike England, it was occupied in World War I. It was devastated in World War I. And I don't think anyone could bear the idea that it would happen again. And so this fashion and this sort of looking at these beautiful escapist things almost fits sort of that time period. Also in that time period, you have this fantastic dress. I hope you all recognize this, but this is Wallace Simpson, Duchess of Windsor. And if you remember, Wallace Simpson is the woman King Edward VIII. He could not envision ruling without the woman he loved by his side, American divorcee Wallace Simpson, and he abdicated the throne to his younger brother Bertie, who became King George VI. So all of Wallace's trousseau was designed by Elsa Scaparelli. This was the capstone, the famous 1938 lobster dress, designed by Scaparelli with lobster designed and created by Salvador Dali. Now, Dali wanted the lobster to reach up and sort of snatch at the Duchess. There was a huge fight. Scaparelli refused to do that. She won the battle. The fan is top and the lobster's claws are pointing downward. So it's a little less aggressive, but it's still a very provocative dress. Remember, this is 1938. The center is transparent. And it has only 3 layers of silk and is held together at the edges by fish bone. It weighed less than a pound. I mean, it was extraordinary. One more thing about this dress. Once it was designed, Salvador Dali brought a large jar of mayonnaise to the salon, fully intending to slather the entire dress in mayonnaise. Scaparelli, another fight ensued. Scaparelli said she would never work with him again if he did that. And there are 2 reasons we know he did not do that. Number 1, the Duchess is not dripping mayonnaise. But number 2, they did design another dress. And I very purposely do not have a picture of this dress because I want you all to look it up when you read the London House. But it's also one of those moments where what you read is not what is. So in 1939, they designed the tears dress. At least that's what I thought. And I thought tears, well, tears are water and they're light. This is going to be something lighter than this, and this is only a pound, but it's going to be maybe blues and greens and even more transparent. Well, once I saw pictures, I realized it's not the tears dress at all. It's the tears dress. It is a white silk gown with tears within it. And in those tears, you'll see brown and red and pink, as if you are tearing through the gown into the woman underneath. It's a crazy looking dress. But I want to share with you one more picture. I mean, if we're talking about light, beautiful, escapist, and just fabulous design, I think this captures it. It's from 1936. This is Scaparelli's butterfly dress. Plays a prominent role in the London House. Caro buys an early copy of this dress for her sister Margaret and sends it to England. Margaret thinks it's the most beautiful thing everything she's ever seen. It is light. It is the softest shade of pink. She lays it on the couch in her bedroom and she never picks it up again. She never wears it. You'll have to read the book to find out why. But I did fall in love with this dress, and it really did embody all the hope, lightness, and love that the novel does sort of reach for here and there. So that's a little bit of the research, but I want to share another aspect of the research because it is a contemporary storyline. And to make the past accessible to the present, I wanted them to interact. I did not want them to run side by side. The past is revealed through letters and diary entries. And the past is also revealed through some pretty fun research. So in late January of 2020, I was writing The London House, and I needed to get to London. I had lived there in the early 2000s, but there was just some research I wanted to get my hands on. And after living there, I knew it existed. I knew where it was. I could just almost touch it. So I asked my husband, when can we go? I will be ready in April. And we had one child living home at the time. And he said, no, Mary Margaret has, that's our daughter's name, has a long weekend in mid-February. Let's take her with us and just get it together and let's go. So I got online, I ordered all my research cards, I ordered the files I needed, and we hopped a plane about 2 weeks later, and we spent 4 days. And they went to restaurants and shows, and they had an incredible time, but I had a better time. I hopped off the plane, and I went straight to the National Archives, where I spent 2 days. I then went to the British Library for a day, and the late afternoon, I went to Churchill's War Rooms, and then the next day, before the plane ride home, went to the Imperial War Museum. It was almost like Caroline, who's the contemporary heroines, it was like her search for the truth, just nonstop research, and it was fantastic. So the SOE is the Special Operations Executive. Formed in 1940, it was England's first foray into the spy world. I'm not talking intelligence or reconnaissance, that already existed, but I mean sabotage, blowing things up, true spy work. And they called it ungentlemanly warfare. And certainly no lady was involved at the time, which plays into the London House as well. But the documents can be accessed by anybody. I mean, it's amazing. You just fill out a form and they hand you all of the SOE files. Only 10% actually. 90% were burned in a fire in 1999. But that 10% is pretty rich. Within a couple files, I found myself looking at the original memo from Winston Churchill to Hugh Dalton, who was the Minister of Economic Warfare, I think, or Economics. He was tasked to start the SOE, and it's a typewritten memo, but the salutation and the postscript are all handwritten in pencil. So it's Dear Hugh, Winston Churchill. And I'm like, oh, I could touch that. And I did. But it was so much fun. I mean, history really came to life. And that did change the story a little because there was just so much vibrancy in it. It really helped pull that past storyline into the present and meld the two. So there's a real conversation between them. So that's a little bit about the London House. And I would love to answer any questions. But before I do, I want to tell you about another book. So in May of 2020, oh, and by the way, so when we got up on our last day in London, the newspaper read London had its first COVID case. I had not heard of COVID at that time, knew nothing about it, but we flew out the very day the first case hit the hospital. I mean, so obviously 2 weeks later, and I would not have gone to London. We all know what happened here in the US 2 weeks later too. But so in May of 2020, I released a book called A Literature and Lattes. And it just, I think May of 2020 was a really rough time to launch a book. We were all looking here and we were not looking at books published over here. But the questions on that are fair game too. And it's a book that takes place in a fictional town of Windsor. If you read my book, The Printed Letter Bookshop, it is not a sequel to that book, but it does start the very weekend that book ends. And it does have a lot of the same characters, but a couple new ones too. And it is a story of second chances, love, coming home, and finding oneself. So just there's a lot of fun in it, and a lot of cute little 6-year-old girl and all sorts of fun stuff, but so of literature and Lattes too. There you go.
Just don't want to squeal it either, so. Does anybody have any questions? Do you mind? Some people do.
I never mind. The microphone is- I have a question about what was the most challenging thing when you decided to write an historic timeline as well? Because you're very well known for contemporary. So what was the most, or a few of the most challenging things?
You know, I think one of the most challenging things I did not want, as I said, I did not want the two storylines to run parallel.
Mhm.
I really wanted them to interact. So I was thinking about this the other day, and one could say that I wrote a contemporary book with a lot of letters and diary entries in it. I mean, one could.
One could?
One
could say anything.
One could say anything, but what I mean by that is the storyline absolutely, I think, does stand on its own. But one of my challenges was I needed relevance, immediate relevance, and that's the contemporary writer of me. I wanted us, today's reader, to be able to step into both journeys and feel that they could understand these characters and be a part of their lives.
So what I'm hearing is that the reader is right along with you in the research of it. Like you are putting them in your shoes as a researcher, and that's exciting.
I'm kind of hoping, because that's part of Caroline's journey. The present day, she is finding the truth behind the secret. She is finding all of this. You know, one aspect that of course I got a little nervous and I skipped right over is that there is this family secret that has overshadowed this family for 80 years. And it isn't so much the secret, but it's how it was misunderstood or lied about or misinterpreted or just hidden away. And it's not so hard to believe that something like this can take on a life of its own. I mean, you get two neighbors and they fight about the hedgerow between the house. Then their children bully each other at school. Then their grandchildren have all-out war and boycott each other's businesses and everything else. And then you've got Romeo and Juliet. So you know, you can see how things take a life of their own. And that is Caroline's search, is to figure out what is the truth and what does that mean for me today? And what could that mean for her whole family?
Yeah. I'm just curious because this seems to have more of a somber tone, both out of the historical looming that's coming, as well as kind of this family fallout, compared to some of your other books, which have like a lightness to these narratives. And I'm just kind of curious how your books up until this point have prepared you to, you know, to write The London House.
You know, that's so interesting. I think I tackle some challenging things and maybe make them feel like, because remember, dear Mr. Knightley grew up in the Chicago foster care system and had a pretty rough childhood.
Yeah.
Poor Lizzie was fighting, Lizzie and Jane, she's fighting breast cancer.
Right.
But
you have this front.
No, I know. And I hope that's here too. And part of actually was bringing in the dresses, bringing in these other aspects of life, bringing in, you know, some relationships that are light. Because I agree with you, these are sort of heavy things, but if we don't have that bit of light, then you can feel burdened rather than hopeful. And I always am reaching for that hopeful feel. So the frothy dresses provide something. There's some great descriptions of food. Visiting Paris and visiting London in a contemporary context is always fun. The house is gorgeous. The London house itself is spectacular. So you're right. There's all of this other stuff that wraps around the story to keep you feeling this is that sort of adventure that's well curated.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question.
Anybody else? Is there anything outlined?
I have another question.
Okay.
Just to, anyway. So with some of the, you know, you have buoyant themes in the book, but also the darkness. How was that writing it during the pandemic? How did that impact you emotionally? How did your emotions impact it? Was it a good escape for you? All of that. Answer all the things.
All the things, okay. It was, I think, it was a great escape at the beginning of the pandemic, because I really couldn't bury myself in this fictional world, and I loved it. But to your point, though, there were different themes that came out, the different themes in the pandemic. I think actually the idea of truth came out. There were so many times in the pandemic we didn't know what was going on. And information was coming out as quickly as, the virus is mutating, I guess. And so I think themes of truth and themes of hope and themes of, a firm place to stand no matter what buffers you, those kind of themes wove themselves into the story during the pandemic, and perhaps more than they would have otherwise. But I think they all actually made the book more hopeful, which is a nice way to end that kind of journey.
Yeah.
How did your own levels of curiosity about particular time periods or areas of the country or around the world, how did your own curiosity play into the books that you write?
They always play into. I mean, absolutely. Okay, so I think I always love to look back at A Portrait of Emily Price when asked that question, because in A Portrait of Emily Price, she is an insurance restoration expert. And I love that idea of science of the restoration and the idea of the artist and beauty. And so there's a lot of technical things that go with that world. And so I interviewed somebody and I spent a few days with them and I had a great time. And then I got an invitation to go to the Vatican Research and Restoration Labs. And so I got to do that. So that played into the story. So I had two different levels of restoration going on in science and art and all the rest. But to your point, it just grew bigger. Something that intrigued me became this really rich idea. And I'll say, after the London House, I'm not quite yet returning to contemporary fiction. My next will be historical, because I stumbled upon another time period that I really wanted to dig into, and I thought had just a lot to offer on so many different issues and just emotions. So I'm gonna dig in there again. Unfortunately, fashion won't be a part of it. I really enjoyed that further research too. So that may come out in another book.
It sounds to me like you're a tremendous researcher, and the ability to be able to go to London and do what you did had to be, as a writer, had to be absolutely phenomenal. But I want to know, what got you started on the road to writing in the first place?
Okay, it's one very, very specific event. I was seriously injured at the very end of 2008, to the degree that most things in my life were taken away, the blocks that made up my days. I couldn't run, I couldn't do my job, I couldn't even make dinner for my kids. And so it was a lot of time on my couch, recuperating, praying, reading, and a story came. That is where Dear Mr. Knightley came from that year of recovery, and it really was a year. And when I came out of that year and I had Dear Mr. Knightley, nothing went back to the way it was. All of a sudden I was a writer with a contract, and I started writing books. So it was a very specific event. Yeah, and I wonder where I'd be without that big injury, which I would never want to go through again, but
Maybe that was just a really a divine appointment of the Lord in your life.
it was, absolutely was. Yeah. So
There was some tragedy there that apparently took place. I mean,
that's the only time I listen. So you're right. To get my attention. Yeah.
some of us are like that.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say most of the time. So I'm curious, just knowing a little bit about the industry. Harper Muse is a new imprint.
It is.
So can you tell us how that came about and how you ended up with Harper Muse and what they're doing and all that?
Harper Muse is a new HarperCollins imprint, and their specialty are just fun stories of historical fiction, I believe Southern fiction, and maybe contemporary.
Women's fiction.
It's a women's fiction imprint. General market, just it's just a lovely house, and they're brand new, and I'm just so excited to be a part of it. This is their debut season. Patty Callahan's Once Upon a Wardrobe was the first release. I think mine's the second release, and there are a few more this fall. But it's really exciting to be a part of that.
Yeah. So how did you end up with them? Because
I have never fit super well in the Thomas Dustin imprint where I was before. And I just slotted beautifully in what they wanted to do. And so when I was pitching this book, they had not even started the imprint, and they said, "Can you wait? Because we're getting this going, and then we want to offer with it." And so I was really excited about that. So that's how it came about.
I'm gonna be like Susie. I want to be like Susie when I grow up.
We all do.
Another one.
We all want to.
We're the same age.
I think I'm actually older. But you know, whatever. I'm curious about how you ended up stumbling on fashion, because that seems to be like a really big theme in this book. And I'm just curious how you ended up there.
And a follow-up question, can I have that butterfly dress?
Wasn't it beautiful?
It's beautiful.
Like, I mean, 1936, and I would wear this in a heartbeat,
Yeah.
and I would, I mean, like, this dress looks good. I mean, it's just, it looks great today. The fashion, you know, I can't quite remember.
That's okay.
But I honestly think Elsa Scaparelli was fascinating. I mean, she was the designer pick. When she left, but they thought she was a German spy. And when she left France in 1941, she moved south, ran her salon from Free France to the south for a little while, even though the salon stayed open in Paris, then moved, I think in 1941 to the US, where she was under FBI surveillance for the 4 years she lived here. And then she moved back to France. But I might have actually stumbled upon her as just this fascinating figure, and then the fashion came out of it. May or may not have been that way. It was sort of like just I found just that gem the story needed, and it really just worked out in so many ways, because fashion was such a great way to reveal character and to reveal intention and to show conflict. And you know, prior to this, I'll say, I had not really thought of fashion as a political statement, and Elsa Scaparelli did. She was very intentional in her designs, and so that changed everything for me.
That's very interesting.
They're really, really cool.
Fashion is part of the political statement. I know, I can't wait.
Do you have any else? Okay, so we're gonna post this up for those of you here. Sorry, online, you missed out. Katherine is gonna be around for a little while signing books in the back, so give us just a couple minutes to get set up. If you haven't brought your book yet, the registers are gonna stay open, what is it? 7:30, they'll be open till 8:30 or so. If we're done before that, of course, they'll go home, but so plan accordingly if you have some shopping to do. But other than that, thank you very much for coming. Thank you. You guys are gonna like the book, because what I've learned now after having read it, I'm like, oh, now I gotta read it again. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I love the passion part of it, so I appreciate it. So thank you for coming.
My goodness, I loved it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you all for joining us online. Have a good night.